following your master plan, we came in and began a series of public meetings, specifically aimed at Wheelock Park. As we said, there was some question about several items: skate park, dog park, Wheelock Park itself. Because the electrical company was coming in, there would be impacts there, and so we began a process of that we normally do of engaging the public to find out what they want. And that's, can you hear me okay? Or should I actually sit down? It's hard for me to sit down and give a presentation. Sorry. And so, yeah, this is a historic gateway at Wheelock Park, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. We started these public meetings and began to ask people what it is they'd really like to see there. Interestingly, Wheelock Park, like I would say most parks that we deal with in existence throughout the country, and here is what it looks like now, has developed over time. And parks develop over time in very consistent ways. They begin back when they were used as either fairgrounds or gathering spaces, concert areas, whatever they were for. And over time, as recreation changes and evolves, they begin to have these uses applied. The way that these uses are applied are interesting. Generally, what happens is the public comes to council says, we need a ball field. They call up the Parks and Recreation Director and say, we need a ball field. And they say, okay, we have some open ground over there. And so they begin to develop a ball field over there. 4 years later, they say, gosh, we don't have a good swimming pool. How about there? And a swimming pool begins to be developed. Later on, somebody says, our ball fields are overused. And my Uncle Joe has a tractor, and his son builds fences, and so we think we could build a ball field. And so over time, you can begin to see that parks develop in a haphazard way, and that's very normal. What happens, though, is that as they develop that way, they often don't actually develop into a park. What they develop into is a bunch of uses scattered around on a piece of ground. And today in modern society, especially, that begins, and I shouldn't even say that, because throughout history, what we've used our parks for is primarily gathering spaces. Unfortunately, as we begin to scatter uses about on them, athletic uses often, they lose their ability to be a gathering space. Not on purpose. Nobody thought about it, that the primary reason for recreation is not athletics, and it's only partly athletics, physical movement. That's really a way for us to gather together. That's why we do it. And so this park typically became that kind of a park. There's a lot of great uses, and in my opinion, there was no there. And so what we began to do was ask the public, okay, if you had to design this park today, what would you like to see? And we got really good input. I will tell you, working throughout the United States, it was a genteel group. Even those who disagreed with us did so in a professional manner. When I say disagreed with us, they disagreed with the general input. Somebody would bring something up and they would say, I don't really need to be too negative, but I'm not sure that's the best way to do that. I'm used to people saying, over my dead body will you ever. So it was actually great meetings, and we came up with a lot of good input. And we began to try to coalesce that into uses that actually created a park where everybody uses the park in the way that they are used today. And I'll give you an example of how they're primarily used today. When many of us, myself included, were young, our mothers or fathers would say, go to the park and be home by dinner. That never occurs today. That is the thing of the past. People go to the park in groups. They go in families, with neighbors, and as such, what's interesting is when you have your uses scattered all over the park, you have part of the group active in whatever their fun activity is, and everybody else is kind of fiddling around. And so one of the things that modern parks can and should do is create a variety of uses that are proximate to each other, where everybody, as they go to the park in groups, has something to entertain them or to create a social atmosphere. Following these public meetings, I hope I pushed the right button, I believe I did, we came up with a series of events and methods to make it work. So I'll start with the mundane things. One of the first things we suggested that should happen is that the traffic should become much more clear and simple. And the reason for that is because athletic uses are much like cinemas. Everybody tends to come and go at the same time, creating pulsing traffic. What you need is the ability for people to smoothly get in and out in groups all at the same time. So what we did was create, and I know there's a fancy light, here we go. Create a system where people can move throughout the park utilizing a better entry at the historic place, a quick escape when there's too much traffic, and this actually is widened so that you have a left and a right turn lane because this is a bottleneck. At the same time, because you have a school right here and a industry that has large trucks coming, you needed to accommodate school traffic, which talk about pulsing traffic. That's, you know, twice to 3 times a day they have tons of cars and the rest of the time none. You have trucks coming and going here, and then all the uses throughout. So, quickly, as you come to your ball field, the most important thing to you is to get the parking space that is closest to where you're going to have your athletic event as possible. You will drive there. As you go, you will note which parking spaces are open that you missed. But you're first going to check out that one. That is the American way. I do the same thing. So what you do is you make sure that this is a flowing system, because you come in, there's a parking space there, there's one there. Oh darn, nobody there. Okay, so you go back and you do this. You want to make sure that can happen in a way that is seamless. Don't try to tell people what to do. Figure out how to make what they already want to do seamless. So we worked very well to create a looped traffic system that allows traffic to flow in and out in pulses, and for people to find a parking space that is as close as it can be to the one they wished that they could get. Secondarily, we created a drainage system, and it's hard to see at this scale. But right now the park doesn't drain perfectly, so as you're rethinking your park, we're suggesting that you create a drain that comes through the center of the park. It's basically a dry creek bed. During a flood event, not a flood event, during a rain event, it will fill with water and run off into the wetlands above. But most of the time it's simply dry. It's a beautiful natural area. So then we got to the more important events. And the more important events is, if everybody comes together, and the primary reason that they're in the park is to socialize, let's build a place that actually encourages that, makes that as much as possible as we can. This right here is one of 2 major keys in the park. That is a gathering plaza. It's not as important what that plaza looked like, although there's some elements that we suggest in there. Interestingly enough, water. A little stone with a little sheen of water coming down it. A couple of play areas. Maybe they're just a rock. Maybe it's something simple. They're not active play areas, they're passive play areas. Benches, picnic tables, shelters, possibly fire. It's interesting more and more that in gathering areas there are gas fireplaces that people can gather around. Pretty much people have enjoyed that since they were people. And it's very effective and common. A restroom is probably the key element. But then the most important thing is what happens around it. And here's what's really key. Here's your gathering space. It is quite close to parking. That's key, because remember, that's the spot you want. But if you don't get it, you see where you're going, and then you go back and get the spot you wish that you noticed. Then look what happens around it. You have ball fields, you have play, and I'm talking about what we call destination play. multi-generational play. It is something that everybody from 2 years old to 60 or 70 or 80 years old has an active ability to play in. And there are playgrounds today done throughout the United States that are aimed at multi-generational play. This is another key element, a dog park. And I always talk about dog parks, and I have to tell you that dog parks are not there for the dogs. Somebody laughed, but that's really true. And I always give the example, if I make it up. If I'm in the park and go to you and say, I'm here to socialize, how about you? It's not going to work so well. But if I say, that's a really cute dog, that is like the icebreaker, or is that your child? That's the important thing. To have a way for people to seamlessly socialize, to break the ice. And that's generally why people use those. That's why we go play games. The games are a way to break the ice, get to know each other, have a reason to socialize. So, the elements: dog park, play, open meadow, not programmable. Put a tree in the middle of it so you can't put a soccer game there. It's for throwing a frisbee, laying on a blanket, whatever is unprogrammed. As importantly, skate park, BMX kids park, ball field. You can see how proximate, and then large unprogrammed ball fields. All of these things are proximate, and that's important so that everybody in the family has something to do, a way to socialize, a way to gather. As we radiate from there, and this is the second most important thing in the park, you will see a series of walks that go around these things. The reason for that is, as your child is playing, or your husband is walking the dog, or your daughter is throwing a frisbee, or somebody's riding a BMX, mom or dad or grandma or anybody in the family can walk a mile or more and never be more than 100 yards away from the rest of the family. Walking is the #1 sport in America. So as you can see, all of these activities generated from this point encompass all the great activities in this town. And you have one of the most active towns that I've ever seen. I live in Boulder, Colorado, which is nationally known as an active town. Keene is so much like Boulder, Colorado. People are active, they eat healthy, they're gathering in the parks, and that's the kind of place that makes this a good place to be. So, once you put all of those elements together, you can begin to see how you then have a park that probably creates the greatest possibility of function that people really want their park to be, which is a way for the town to gather and be together, socialize together. That was the direction. Any questions? That's good, thank you. We did 2 plans. This plan actually has 2 ball fields, here and here. Plan B, which was one of the options, has all the same elements except it has a little more parking and only 1 future ball field. So they're both essentially the same plan with either a 4-plex. One interesting thing I'd show you about this is as a tournament area, or even as an educational area, when you back all of the most active areas, the infields together, there's a better example. You can begin to see how then you create another social area for that specific use. That's also important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting presentation. Maybe we should put you in charge of downtown parking.
I have been in charge of downtown parking in cities before. I can tell you that no matter how many parking spaces you build, it's not enough.
So we've discovered. Does anybody on the council have any questions about this? Yes, Council Roberts.
Yes, Your Honor. When I look at it, I see the multi-purpose. I can make maybe the assumption that's going to be tennis and that's going to be maybe basketball or some of the other ones. But the question that I would look at is, Keene is well known for its horseshoe tournaments and stuff, and it's on the front page today. Are we still going to have horseshoe fields, courts that we have right now? Because I think that's pretty critical.
Absolutely. Every horseshoe field that you have today will remain. You have a world-class, I've never seen such a thing, frankly. And I've worked throughout the United States. You have, as far as I know, the best horseshoe tournament place in the United States. What we've done is create better parking and restrooms for the one you have. We added a restroom close to it. We added quite a bit more parking close to it so that those times of year you have better access parking, and it's not enough parking. More than you have now.
Council Clark.
Yeah, that was my question, actually. How did you do a parking study? Did you do a traffic study?
We didn't do a traffic study. That's a specific thing that actually addresses when the cars come out onto the public roads, which is, the major entry. We just knew that it was obvious that you had a congestion problem there. That's why we, without a traffic study, added another lane. So you have left turn, right turn, because you only had one out lane, and that's going to block a lot of people. But we did a parking study of sorts. There is no national averages for the number of parking spaces that you need for a given use. What we use is the swing factor. We take the number of people on a team and we multiply that times 1.5 for the other people that come to watch, etc. We double that. And the reason for that is because everybody who's coming to play the next game comes before the other people left. So you basically need 2 times the parking. And then we added ancillary uses. We also scattered the parking more than it is now. We found that people like to get as close as they can to their activity. So if you give them that ability to at least see that opportunity, they'll look there first, like we talked about. Then they'll go to a larger parking lot. But they feel good that they might have been able to park 6 feet away from their athletic activity. And with that, we believe you have plenty of adequate parking, and we scattered it at the uses rather than centralized it. We also took all the automotive traffic and brought it to the edge. So the interior of the park is pedestrian and bicycles. The exterior of the park, the traffic is not impeding it or changing the feel of the area.
Further questions? Council Duffy.
Thanks, Your Honor. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I wasn't able to attend all of the meetings with the public as the concept was being developed, but I do remember there was a lot of discussion about how the park is used in the winter. People cross-country ski. They use trails that are on the perimeter of the park to link up with other trails. Some mountain bikers I've seen come through in the berm at the, I guess it'd be the west side of the park near where the Bambino field is, towards the sand pit. There's a whole trail network. And I didn't hear anything in tonight's presentation about that. Was that an idea that was put aside? Is there still a possibility to outline or create connectors for people who are walking or cross-country skiing through the middle? I see a number of trails developed, which I think is a great idea in the middle of the park for people to walk within the perimeter and be close to everything. But many people pass through Wheelock. I've encountered many people who walk from their homes on Arch Street near the high school who marvel at the fact they can basically get to Wheelock Park and be surrounded by trees and trails, not having to walk very much, if at all, on streets. And I'm wondering if that is part of consideration now. Do you have any comment on that?
I do, and I'm remiss for not having spoken to that because you guys do have a great trail system. It speaks a lot to how people like to get around in the town. There is external access, and it will be remain and improved external access. Then we talked to your great staff today and discussed the fact that within the park there should be 3 types of trails. There should be everything from single track, which is the mountain bike type of uses, sort of towards the edges. then a little more refined, probably paved with like a crushed granite for many of the interior trails, but wider, little harder surface, and then paved trails, actually concrete trails for ADA access, anybody who needs a smoother trail, even for rollerblades, those kind of uses. So absolutely, if you can picture that three-tier, very rumbling. Plus, from the exterior, from the highway side of the town, you have that paved trail coming in. That should remain and be expanded. So that is, if somebody chooses, it's actually easier to use that than possibly their automobile. They would choose to come to the park on their bike with their family. And that was very much part and parcel. I guess I should have been more expansive about that.